Welcome to the channel. My name is Eric Print, and today we're going to be working on a project that I've wanted to do since I started casting. So, without further ado, let's get into this project and show you guys what I've done. To start this project off, we need the file that we're going to use for the molding process, and I'm using this one for our project, and I printed out in PLA. I also scaled this down to 94% because the helmet was just too big. Now, the helmet itself needs a lot of smoothing, and the brow itself warped during the print, so I had to fill that in with Bondo, and that just took a long time. Now, smoothing out the helmet would have been faster, but I had to put this on hold for a bit. Now, I put this all in just a coat of primer, and from there I add the cardboard that we're going to be using to keep the PLA out of the helmet. And honestly, that's not too hard. Now, the reason I didn't give this some kind of paint job is because afterwards I want to be able to do something, and I already know that primer doesn't stop the silicone from curing. And by the way, the silicone that we're using is Rebound 25. Now this stuff, all you need to do is measure out equal parts. There's no just a big amount and add a hardener. It's just a simple silicone that you add half and half. Now this stuff I've been using for a long time, and right here you're actually just seeing me use a lot of leftovers that I've collected over the years. Well, actually but yeah. I used 2 kits of silicone that were brand new and a lot of leftovers that I've had. Now, I want you guys to understand that this part of the molding process is very important, and you might want to keep a very close eye on this if you're not using some kind of pressure pot or just something to get the air out of the silicone. Bubbles are very annoying when it comes to helmets when you're making the mold, so you got to keep an eye out for any bubbles that you see when you're putting silicone on whatever you're doing. And this is, I have a lot of coats of regular silicone, and I'm pretty sure I captured all the detail, and afterwards I add this little thing called Thickening. Now, Thickening is a thickening agent that makes your silicone, instead of being runny, more of solid, or somewhat cured in a way. Now, what's very good about this stuff is that you can add this onto the mold and it's not going to fall down, and that's just great. It also makes the mold a little more sturdy. In other words, it's not going to flop around when you're not using it, or it's not going to just move around too much when you're molding. And I fill in all of the gaps as best as I can. I fill in the cheeks, I fill in the visor part. I also intend to fill in the parts that are close to the aerators, but just fill in everything that I can. This is how it looks so far, and I probably, if I just started, would think this is good enough. But honestly, I want to improve on my old mold, so I'm going to be filling in the gaps as best as I can. I'm also going to try to smoothen out the areas close to the mohawk as best as I can to prevent the mother mold that comes after this having too many creases and making it hard to remove later on. So to do this, I just add more silicone that has Thickening in it to be able to fill in all the gaps. And this is mostly how it looks, and it's definitely already better than I thought it would be. Now, this is good and all, but now I have to add regular silicone to the mold to make sure that I cover all the creases and just all the little gaps that definitely need a little more silicone. Now, this process took a little bit, and using a lot of leftovers that I may have, I use it for the keys, the registration keys that we're going to add later on to the mold. And once the silicone has cured after a couple hours, I take it out of its just anything, any little thing you could use, and yeah, just start making squares. And they may look a little big, but I honestly come back and change it up a bit. I made a couple cuts on these things and started adding them to the mold, and I try to keep them on, but I don't have any pins, so they kept moving around. And as you could see, it was very annoying. Sometimes they fell off, and they just so many problems. But eventually I was able to get them to stick, and once they stuck on, I was able to continue working. Now, after I do this, all I really do is come back and add one more coat of silicone. Alright, after the mold is ready, it's time to work on the shell or the mother mold. But first, we need to add something that's going to release it afterwards. And that is called Ease Release 200. Now, I've had this stuff since I started, and I rarely use it, and that's why I have so much of it. Now, keep in mind, once you use this on a mold, you're not going to be able to add more silicone. The reason is because this stuff is a releasing agent and can also be used to prevent silicone from sticking to each other. Now, once you have your releasing agent done, we start with freeform air. And this stuff is basically just clay that cures when you mix it together. I use this stuff for the mother mold, and let me tell you, it's really hard to take off once you add it on. But that's not important right now. Right now, once it all cures and you already made the first half of the mother mold, you add more ease release to be able to a little more easily separate it. It's definitely hard to take off, but it helps in a way. Now, removing it, like I said, was a challenge, but it is doable. And it took me around 7 to 12 minutes to remove because of just how hard it stuck onto the mold. Now, once you remove the mother mold, you can start to begin removing the mold itself. And that was even more of a struggle because silicone, when it sticks to something, is a little hard to remove, especially since this mold is definitely thicker than my last mold. And that's actually very good. If it's thicker, it's not going to be waving around as much. Now, when I made the keys for this, I made them in a way that they'll keep the mold from moving around. And I made bevels on the registration keys on the middle. That way, the mold doesn't create any kind of bump at the top of the helmet, the dome. From there, I just start casting with Smoothcast 300, and I just start mixing and doing my best. So here, I just try to figure out how I'm going to remove it from now on, and it's not too hard. And this first cast is going to pick up a lot of debris, but as we go ahead, we're going to be able to remove more and more of what's left behind, and we'll get better casts as soon as possible. Okay, so our 3D printed helmet is right here, and I haven't painted it at all because, honestly, if I didn't do something right, I didn't want the paint job to, well, just determine what it would be. As if it's a primer, I could just paint it any color. I could paint it black and do umbra, I could paint it white and just do anything. Now, this is our first cast of the helmet, and it picked up a lot of what was left behind from this one. Some of the dust that was still on the helmet, it picked up, and it also picked up some of the debris that were left behind from here. Yeah, there was also some bits right there. You can see the primer. And the reason that happens is because the silicone sticks onto the helmet so well that it pulls away some bits that are on the helmet. And that's precisely what happened on, well, if I move this out of the way, I'll be able to show you right here. It pulled this part right off. And that honestly happens. And I could fix it later on, but for now I'm just going to leave it like this. Now the first cast is going to pick up most of the debris, and probably past the second cast you'll be able to get cleaner helmets. But either way, sometimes you just paint over this, give it a good primer. Honestly, it's all up to you, but for me, I like to just cast a helmet and then immediately take this off and get to work. So these are going to need a little work, but not too much. Now, this is our second cast right here, and it's already looking better, but there was one mistake. This. I hate bubbles whenever it happens, so yeah. I'm going to have to make this look damaged so that it would make sense that some parts are not that well made. And there's still some bubbling right here, which is really annoying, but it'll get better over time. As soon as it picks up all of the debris, it'll get better. Now, you might be asking yourself, why didn't I make one of the earpieces for this? And the reason for that is because I want to be able to add the earpiece right here or a rangefinder right here. And I wouldn't have to do much right here. I'm actually thinking about making another mold, a small one for the earpiece, and maybe to some extent a bigger mold for the rangefinder, just to save myself some time. However, that is something that I'm still thinking about. I definitely have to 3D print them first, make them look really nice, but as for if I make a mold, that's yet to be determined. But yeah, there's definitely some flaws in my mold making skills. There's this, which I was really hoping wouldn't happen, but it just happens. It just takes a little work and it'll be gone. Now, yeah, compared to the first one, this is definitely better. It's picked up almost no debris, but still needs some work. But either way, I'm just finally glad that I can actually start making these as soon as possible. And I don't have to worry about the dome being a little, well, just beaten in. It honestly is just better off than it was before. Now this is just a little comparison of my original helmet, and let me tell you, there's a bunch of flaws. First off, where the teeth are, there's some bubbles that were created because of silicone moving. And on my other helmet, there are still a couple of those, but not as bad as the original helmet. And the mold itself, the original, has a lot of crevices that I just couldn't fill because I didn't even know what Thickening was. And yeah, that made making the shell itself a different challenge. I don't know what I was thinking when I started. This new mold has so much silicone that I was able to do the mother mold the way I did, just 2 pieces. I was able to slide it off, and honestly, some of the dents that are on my helmets contributed to the idea of just putting the keys in the middle and figuring out how to do it like that. That's the bevel that keeps it from moving. So both of these right here are mother molds. Basically the hard shell that keeps the mold from moving around a lot. And because the mold was made differently and it was an improvement, I was able to actually make the mother mold the way I did. That being just 2 pieces that align and connect properly like this. Yeah, it still needs a little work. I might add some holes or screws to keep it together when I'm molding, but the fact that it's just 2 pieces is a huge improvement. Now, if we look at my original one, we could see I did it in 4 pieces, and originally I had hoped to be able to put screws to keep this together while I'm molding, and unfortunately that didn't work out. Instead, I had to hold these things together the whole time. And they're old now. They've been around for a year, so you could see that they've been stained. And they do work, but they're just not as good as they used to be. I had to make these in a weird way because at the time I wasn't sure how much of this I'd really needed. So I held on a lot of this stuff and didn't use it all. So yeah, there was that. There's also the fact that since I've had this for over a year, I sort of broke it sometimes, but not to a horrible extent. But yeah, this thing was just not that well made, and neither was the mold. But at the time, I just didn't have that much. I didn't have a lot of money to be able to pay for a lot of smooth cast or just any of this in general. And actually, if you look onto here, you could see some of the remnants of my attempts at making a mother mold. I was trying to make it out of fiberglass cloth, something like that, and it picked up on my mistakes, and it just goes to show not everything works out. But yeah, I've come a long way since I started. Now I'm able to make this in 2 pieces because the mold itself is much smoother. There's not much crevices for this to get into and get stuck like the Mandalorian mold. That one was my fault. There was things I could have done differently, but now I'm picking up as best as I can, and yeah, hopefully you guys figure this stuff out too, with experience. So, just behind me are the helmets that I just showed you guys, and to tell you the truth, I'm kind of glad that I was delayed when it comes to making the mold for this helmet, because I've learned so much since I started. I mean, I already showed you guys that my first mold, I used, I think, 2 or 3 kits of Rebound 25, and it still was sort of a disaster. And now that I know more, I know about Thickening, I know about just weighting and how a lot of things can, well, contribute to what your cast can be like. Like the bevels that were made for the registration keys, that was something that I never done before and was about to completely forget about, but I thought, just why not? So it does go to show that even though you fail, you do pick up a thing or two. So I'm very glad that I got to do this one, that now I could start making new helmets, and needless to say, I'll be making more animated helmets these days instead of realistic ones. But I'm pretty sure that's a good thing, since we all watch the Clone Wars and I always wanted to do animated helmets. So, thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, please like, share, and subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Until the next one, have a good one.